Hello again. So here I am on my Talk to Joe page on Thursday at 9:50. I'm here every week. So hello everybody, and I've put the talk title as Making Mistakes and Having a Glass Half Full. I remember a number of years ago when I was first engaged in seeing a counsellor, and we were talking about, was I a glass half full person or a glass half empty person? And I said, I'm definitely a glass half empty. I'm the eternal pessimist. And I was one of those people that thought perhaps that if I was pessimistic, then I wouldn't be disappointed when things go wrong. And she said to me, she said, one day you'll probably just wake up and you'll find you'll be a glass half full person. And at the time, that just seemed like an impossible dream. But she was right, and it wasn't during the time that I was having counselling with her. It took a number of years for me to develop that glass half full way of being. But it's definitely happened now, so I want to share how that can happen. Now, some of you may know my husband is actually a magician, so in his spare time. One of the things we've got, it just happened to be lying around, is a magic wand. And it was lying next to my desk yesterday, next to a journal I keep called the Happiness Journal. And, I'm on Instagram at the moment. It's my latest fun thing that I'm doing. So I took a photo of the magic wand next to the Happiness Journal, and I thought, I'm sure there's a message in this for me, but I can't think what it is. Hi Christine, nice to see you. Yeah, so anyway, the magic wand thing is quite often, it would be lovely if somebody could wave a magic wand over us and help us to be happy. But unfortunately, it isn't as easy as that, as we all know. And part of the journey in order to get to being a glass half full person is to actually start taking responsibility for our feelings. And I think one of the hardest things that I found to get my head around when I was training to be a counsellor is the tutor used to say, nobody can make you feel anything. And I just found that such a difficult concept to get my head around. And the reason was at that point in my life, what I was doing was I was looking to other people and external circumstances to make me happy. And when things happened that I didn't like and that I felt unhappy with, I would blame other people and circumstances for that, rather than actually thinking to myself, how am I choosing to respond to this situation? And it's that shift in thinking that's enabled me to become a glass half full person. So any of you who've seen my blog that I've written this week, it's about the 4 stages of competence model in terms of learning. And I find that a really helpful way of looking at the world, because it talks about how we move from unconscious from unconscious incompetence. We then move on to conscious incompetence. Once we've moved through conscious incompetence, we moved to conscious competence. It's very confusing. And finally, when we become really skilled, we move to unconscious competence. And so when we're learning something new, when we're learning a new skill, what we're doing is initially we are unconscious of our incompetence. We maybe don't even think that we need to have that particular skill. We don't really value it. And then what begins to happen is we begin to realise that we actually do need to master a particular skill, but we become very aware that we're not very good at it. And that is the sort of a good stage to be at, because we're actually learning that we need to master this new skill. And through making mistakes, and it's in this stage that we tend to make a lot of mistakes, we're actually learning how to master that particular skill. So the stage where we're very aware of the mistakes we're making is actually a really positive stage to be at, because it's showing us what we need to do, and as we become aware of our mistakes, we're able to address them. And then what happens is we move to conscious competence. So we really have to think about what we're doing, but what we're doing is it's getting better, we're becoming more competent, and eventually we get to unconscious competence, unconscious competence. And that is where it becomes like second nature and we don't really have to think about it. And the easy analogy here to draw would be when we're driving a car. Once we've been driving for a few years, we don't have to think about braking or slowing down when we get to a traffic light, or we don't have to think about looking left and right when we're drawing out of junction, or looking in our mirror or changing gear. It just becomes second nature, and that's when we've reached the point of unconscious competence. So why am I sort of talking about this? It's really to encourage everybody that when we're making mistakes, in actual fact what we're doing is we're learning. And I think that's a really important mindset to have in order to be the glass half full sort of person. It's looking at what we're doing and actually finding the good in it. And what can happen is when we are, say, learning a new skill or moving forward in something, we can feel a real sense of difficulty in it, and we can wonder maybe what other people will think of us if they look at us, you know, not being able to do something very well. And we can sort of feel this sense of shame that we're not very good at doing something. And we begin to imagine that people are looking at us and wondering, you know, what on earth do we think we're doing, and how could we possibly think we're good enough to be doing something like this, and who do we think we are trying to do something. And it's really important at this point to be empathic towards our own feelings of, you know, it's really difficult to do something new. It's really difficult to be in this situation. And if we've made a mistake, you know, that sort of sense of shame that we have, oh God, everybody's going to see that and think I'm stupid. So to be able to sort of sit with those feelings and to recognise that we're feeling those feelings, and to be kind to ourselves and to be empathic and think, yes, I am feeling those feelings and they're really difficult. But then also in recognising that we're feeling those feelings, to actually think, but what am I going to choose to focus on? And we can be compassionate to ourselves and choose to focus our attention on something more positive. And again, this is where we begin to work into this glass half full way of being. So what am I actually focusing on? You know, what is it that I actually can do in this situation? You know, it's so easy when we're looking at a particular mistake that we've made to just completely narrow our focus on that mistake rather than broadening our focus and thinking about it in context, about what was going on for us at the time and about all the other things that we do that perhaps is more positive and that we can feel good about. So where are we going to choose to focus our attention? Are we going to choose to keep going back to that mistake and sort of banging on about it and getting cross with ourselves about it? Or are we going to choose to see what else is going on in our lives? And it helps from this point of view to think about, what are we actually thinking? You know, am I seeing this too much in terms of black or white? Am I making it an either or? Is it possible to maybe think that there are grey areas in between? Is it possible to bring in more dimensions to this particular thing that's happened than what I'm thinking about? And in this regard, it's quite helpful. When we feel shame, shame thrives on secrecy, it thrives on silence, it thrives on us thinking that we can't connect with other people because we're so bad. But actually, if we begin to test out what we're feeling with other people, with someone who we really trust, with maybe someone who's more experienced, with maybe someone who can be a mentor to us, with maybe another person who's going through what we're going through. And if we can say, you know, I felt terrible because I did X, Y, and Z, quite often what can happen is they say, yeah, I've been there, I've done that. Or, I know how that feels, you know, I've done something very similar. And if we begin to connect with other people, we begin to find that we're not as alone in what we've been experiencing as we think. And there's this sort of wonderful point where you realise that you're actually just very normal, and what you're going through is actually shared with a lot of other people, especially those who perhaps are more experienced than you. You know, if they're really sort of helpful people, you don't want to say to somebody who's always been boastful, because they're not going to understand, they're not going to get it. But if you can find someone who you can trust, who you feel might be able to get it, and share with someone like that, usually they'll say, me too. And that's really helpful. And we begin to see that actually we're just normal. And that gives us such a lot of courage to carry on. And the other thing to think about is to accept our limitations, to be compassionate to ourselves and to accept that we're just learning and that these mistakes that we're making are part of the learning process. And that we're not incompetent, or if we are, we're at that stage of conscious incompetence, and that's okay. And I think if we begin to take responsibility for our feelings, if we begin to realise that we are responsible for our experience of life, that we have choices as to what we pay attention to, that very gradually begins to change us. And it does get to that point, if we can begin to find the good things in every day, just the small things each day as we wake up, and try and focus on the things in our lives that we can actually be grateful for, the small things that we can really enjoy, then gradually, very gradually, that glass begins to feel a lot fuller, and we do suddenly wake up one day and realise that we've become a glass half full person. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm very happy to see you, and thank you for staying with me. And if you'd like to know any more, obviously I've got my blog up on the business page, and that talks a little bit more about the principles of the 4-stage model of competence, and it might be a bit clearer in the blog than actually what I've done today. So do feel free to have a look at that. Also, do feel free to contact me via Facebook, via the messaging app. And if you'd like to receive my blog, if you go along to my website, which is thegoodenoughmum.com, you can sign up for emails, and I'll be sending the blog out by email. So thanks very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again another time. Bye.